My goal is to get every dentist to cut down their days. I've seen this time and time again, and even in my own career, is when I cut down my clinical days, my practice started growing faster and I started making more money. I've got to convince a lot of dentists that they have people on their team that are capable of doing that. And sometimes it's a challenge, but I assure you, you do. We're taught to work smarter, not harder, like you mentioned. What does that mean? That means more efficiency in my procedures. What can I do at my practice that nobody else can do? And we immediately go, oh yeah, it's the dentistry. But what we don't realize is that the team requires a leader. Say the only thing the owner can do that no one else can do is lead the team. This is like the biggest leadership principle I think that anyone could take away from this is an idea. It's called.
Welcome back to another episode of Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the owner of SMC National, where we help offices just like yours level the playing field against the big guys out there so you can grow the way that you want, but you can grow a lot faster if you get your team involved. In today's episode, Dr. Paul, who's an owner doctor and practicing dentist, is going to break down how he uses his team to grow his practice and how you can do the same too. All right, we are live and I have Dr. Paul here and I'm excited about this topic because I know people listening are going to want to learn more about this. And the question for you for this, Paul, is this: how do you get your team to run the office for you?
Yeah, and it's a great question because we just hear that and we go, man, wouldn't that be nice? And I can tell you, it is nice. And I think it's life-changing for dentists that I've helped do this, but it does take some setup. So how do we get our team to run the office for us? And we've got to put like little quotes in there too. I don't want to give the impression that you're not going to do anything at your office. You're still going to be present. You're still going to be a leader. You're still providing the vision and stuff. But what happens with us as dental practice owners is we grow our practice to a certain point, and we grow it because we're spending time on it because we have time between patients. At a certain point, we get so busy that we can't even keep up with the growth. And we're just like paddling and we're barely keeping above water because of all the things that are coming at us in all the different directions that we're getting pulled at as owners. When we sit down and we look at every normal business, they have management, they have structure. But then we walk into our dental business and we say, well, I'm the owner and I call the shots. And that's just the way it is. We can really benefit from bringing some team members into a leadership team in our practice and giving them roles and giving them responsibilities, especially starting with a lot of the things that we don't really enjoy doing as practice owners. Because let's face it, if we don't like doing it, we're not going to do it very well. So giving them the roles, giving them responsibilities, and then training them up and teaching them how to manage people and provide the training and what our employees need to be happy at work so that we can then step back and start focusing on what's going to take this practice to the next level. Like my goal is to get every dentist to cut down their days. And I've seen this time and time again, and even in my own career, is when I cut down my clinical days, my practice started growing faster and I started making more money. And it's because I had the time and energy to sit down and say, what do we need to do? Where do we need to take this practice? Rather than, hey, I'll do that on Friday when I'm off. And then Thursday night rolls around and you're like, dude, I'm spent. Maybe next week. And next week happens a lot for a lot of dentists. So it's about being intentional about how do we get the team involved? How can I get some help here? And more or less, I've got to convince a lot of dentists that they have people on their team that are capable of doing that. And sometimes it's a challenge, but I assure you, you do.
Yeah. So I love this topic because the whole idea of just making more by working less is very counterintuitive, but it's about, they teach you this, you hear this early on in business is like work smarter, not harder. Right. And in dentistry, it's super confusing. Right. It's really, and it can be confusing in any business, really. Like, are you focusing on the high value activities inside of your business that's going to be the best to produce whatever you want to produce, right? More money or more time or whatever that is. How do you work through that with dentists when you are consulting with them, when you're working with their team? So we're really talking about getting their teams to run the practice for you, but you're also throwing in that caveat of like working less and making more. How can you marry those two together? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so working less and making more, we're taught that. We're taught that work smarter, not harder, like you mentioned. But a lot of dentists, we say, well, smarter, not harder. What does that mean? That means more efficiency in my procedures. What can I do at my practice that nobody else can do? And we immediately go, oh yeah, it's the dentistry. I'm the only one that can provide the dentistry. But what we don't realize is that the team requires a leader. They require somebody to project the vision, to take the practice somewhere. It's not about controlling people, but it's about inspiring and influencing people to go to a higher level and improve upon itself. So I would say the only thing the owner can do that no one else can do is lead the team. So what I have to do when I'm working with clients is help them realize that I know you think you're so valuable cutting crowns and doing fillings, and you think, well, if only I could cut more crowns and do more fillings, I could make more money. So I'll open more days. I'll stay later. I'll come in earlier. And what I want to convince people is if we can get all of the systems in our practice efficient and we can get them documented and we can make sure we get agreement from the team that we're all following it, things start to just improve and become like more profitable as is. But then if we prioritize then the time spent to manage, to work with our team, to have meetings and communication and to train our teams to a standard that we create, we can take our practice to a whole nother level that gives us this freedom of time that so many people want. And if you think about the things you do at your practice or in any job, the things that you do really well, they tend to be things that you enjoy doing. But dental owners probably spend 70% of their time doing stuff they don't enjoy. And I mean, I give this example from recent. I had an expense report that I used to have to give to we partnered up with a DSO and they had this expense report. It is like I hate the thing. I hated it. And I was like, every time I did it, I'm like, this is the last time you're doing it. You're training someone else to do it. And I would do it month after month after month. It would bother me for 2 weeks going up to it, and then it would bother me for 2 weeks after it because it would be 2 weeks late. And I finally sat down, I trained my assistant how to do it. She tried it once, she had a few questions, she never asked me a question ever again. And then she told me the other day, oh my gosh, I love that doing that expense report. It's so fun. And I was just like, I thought she was being sarcastic. I was like, yeah, tell me about it. She's like, no, I really mean it. I do like it. So the things that you don't like doing, there's people on your team that would love to do it and take more responsibility because we think about like what do we get out of a job? Like our employees, they will get this place to go where they've got these great relationships with their other coworkers, but also it gives them a place to go to where they can be utilized for their gifts and also feel competent in doing something worthwhile. So if we're not providing training, if we're not giving our team autonomy to make decisions, we're just pretty much telling them just to follow A, B, C, D, D, and then just we're telling them what to do. They're not using their brains, and it's not engaging. And so, if part of our practice is to keep people so we can grow, everything about this makes for a good practice and a good culture, and hence it gives you the freedom, and that's what we all want is the freedom to do what we want to do.
Voting is open for Dental Woo's top dental podcast. It starts on November 1st and ends on December 31st. Each vote supports the podcast. Last year, we won multiple top spots, and this year, we're hoping to do even better. This year, our goal is to get 1,000 unique voters on this podcast. Help us reach our goal, and your vote will count. Voting is easy. Just click the link below and find Dental Marketing Go, and then submit it. It's super fast.
Yeah, we don't realize that by doing things, saying I'm going to do all the things and I'm not going to let my team do these things for me, you're actually creating a really boring work environment. We've all been there before. I remember when I worked at Dairy Queen, it was my first job. The worst thing in the world was when it was slow. That was like, it was torture to sit there. I was being paid for it. I think minimum wage was like $4 an hour, $5 an hour, something crazy like that, right? I'm sitting there making $4 or $5 an hour, but it was just so boring. But when it was busy and I was allowed to actually do the thing, work just flew by. And unfortunately, a lot of people are creating work environments that people don't want to be at because they're not really challenged because you're not letting them be challenged. Now, one pushback I would have, and I'll share this story so that way that people feel a little more comfortable about it. When I first got started in business, I said things like this: my team sucks. They don't get it. That nobody understands it. And then what ended up happening is I created this like bottleneck where I became the bottleneck of the company. Everything had to flow through me. I ended up turning over my whole team, early on, as a lot of people do, as a new leader. And I realized, oh, stink. It's not them. It's me. I was creating that. I was the problem. It wasn't them. for the most part. There was definitely people that needed to be let go, but there was also a lot of people that I'm sure would have thrived in the right environment and the right processes. So how do you know when you're actually have that team to do what you want to do versus and I'll create the dilemma that dentists are in. You hear a lot of people like, if you got a toxic person, you got to dump them, you got to get rid of them, you got to move them off the shelf. So it's like we're getting two conflicting messages, right? Like, be the amazing leader, make the environment, you're in charge. If it's a horrible environment, it's your problem. And we're also hearing like, get rid of the toxicity, get rid of the bad people. How does someone know which environment that they're in and which direction to go?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to tell unless you're providing a lot of clarity and expectations of what you want people to do, as well as you got to stay on top of it. I mean, it's not something what we do as dental owners so often is we have these expectations of what our team is supposed to do, and then they don't do it. Or somebody else comes to us and tells us somebody else is doing something, and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll address it. And then we put it off. And then eventually we're like, man, why can't they just be cool and just do what they're supposed to do? Why won't this go away? And then we're playing catch up and reacting. So my suggestion would be, how do you know is you have to be proactive about your management style. So being clear about what every step and what the responsibilities for each person are. And I'm saying this is much more than just handing them a job description and just having them sign it and agree to it. This is about a regular cadence of meetings. This is about a regular cadence. And like what I have in my practice, I have my leadership team. I meet with 4 people once every other week. And they meet with their cohorts, their departments. They're meeting with them all the time. But yeah. So I'm meeting as a group and one-on-one with my leads.
The leader, like I feel like a lot of dentists do the group meeting thing, and or at least they do huddles every day. You know what I mean? And I know that's different, but I don't feel a lot of dentists do one-on-ones. I don't think that's like a common thing.
Well, it's because we're not comfortable doing it. And I would tell you, if you wanted to change your practice, like go in there on Monday and do this for 3 weeks and just see. Put a reminder on your phone, be like, take the temperature of the office. How does it feel? Sit down with every single person one-on-one that works with you and just look them in the eye and say, hey, I want to make this place the best place to work at and the best place for patients. What do you see happening here? What frustrates you the most that we can work on? And I think initially people are going to be scared to talk to you about it because a big part, I mean, this is like the biggest leadership principle I think that anyone could take away from this is an idea. It's called psychological safety. It's meaning that anyone that contributes to the team, anyone that comes to you to tell you anything, or if you're soliciting some feedback, when you get it, you don't hurt that person. You don't get critical. You don't point fingers and blame. You don't get defensive. Because if your team doesn't feel safe to talk to you, they're not going to tell you what's going on. And silence, it's an invisible act. We cannot see when somebody is keeping something from us. So this is what happens when your best team member that you thought was like love their job, they show up and put their 2 weeks notice in. You're like, where are you going? Why? And they're like, oh well, I just things got going getting busy in life, and they make up some BS answer because they don't want to tell you that they're tired of walking on eggshells in your practice. And so if we just did the one-on-ones and we just had these conversations, I just had one. Now I do them with my leads and my leads do one-on-ones with their department. I have a team that's almost 40 team members. So I can't do one-on-ones with every single person anymore. But I did a one-on-one with somebody from the front desk for the first time. And I've never done it because I just felt like I wanted to talk to this person at the front desk and get some more information about just what is the vibe at the front. And she was terrified. Like when I said, "Hey, can I talk to you in my office?" It's nothing big. I just want to check in with you. She was just,
Am I in trouble?
yeah,
Are you firing
yeah.
me?
I mean, she was so nervous. And I said, "Hey," I'm asking her, I'm like, "Hey, we've never like sat down like this before." And she's like, "No," like eyes really big. And I'm just like, you know what? The purpose of this is I really want to make this place a great place for everybody. I want to check in with people and just find out how things are going. So I'm just saying, how are things going? I will promise you, I know we haven't done this before, so I have no track record with you of doing this, but this is a safe place. Anything you tell me, I will not tell anybody else. I will not share it with anyone else that you shared something with me. I want to know what's going on the front lines so that we can make this better. Because if we think about our employees that leave, I mean, they get pissed off about something. Why do we do it this way? This person keeps doing this. And it keeps happening over and over again. And they get so frustrated. And then finally, they're just like, I don't get paid enough to do this. and they move on. If you have these one-on-ones with people, you will find out these issues well before they get to that move on point. So to come back to your original question is if you're doing these things and you're setting the expectation and you have these systems and you're checking in with people and seeing how things are going, eventually you're going to find someone, which I find these with people too. They just can't get along with anybody and they just want to rock the boat. And when everything's good, they will find something that is not good and it will be the focus of their existence every day of their life. And that's a toxic person. So if you can't play well in the sandbox with others, you got to go. But you don't know unless you're doing these things, unless you're talking to your team.
A red flag on toxicity that I've learned is that when somebody comes to me and they're like, my last job was toxic, my mom is toxic, my brother's toxic, this is toxic. And I'm just like, oh, you're creating toxic environments everywhere you go. So, and they don't even realize it, right? And it helps me give them grace to be nice to them. It was like, you don't even realize that you're the reason that everything's toxic.
Well, it's almost like you want to say to them like, oh, what do you think's like the common factor in all that? And they're like, oh, just people are mean. No, it's you. You're the common factor in all those relationships.
I want to be the person to talk. I'm like, yes,
No,
this isn't working out.
No, it's better. If anyone's listening, like I'm going to say that's better to left to be unsaid. You say that in your head. You don't say that out loud.
Okay, so I love the one-on-ones. And I'll be honest with you. I'm one of those people that hate one-on-ones. And I can already imagine the dentists that are out there that are like, I'm practicing this many hours. I don't want to do one-on-ones. I know what they're thinking. What am I going to say in these one-on-ones? So I'm going to give a couple of tips, but I would love some of your tips of how you run your one-on-ones. I would say the first thing for me, I run them 30-minute one-on-ones typically, unless it's like very detailed oriented. I have like different leaders on my team that need a lot of details and things. So we do longer one-on-ones, but typically the 30 minutes. And then what I usually start with is like, hey, how you doing, Paul? How's life? And I usually know something about their life that either they're health-wise, family-wise, financial-wise, whatever, either good or negative, doesn't matter. How's that going? And I just talk to them about that for 10 minutes. Is there anything I can do to like help with that or to make it better, make it, whatever. And so I want to usually connect with them on a human level. And I care, like I literally care. I like want to help them. And so that's one of the easiest ways to connect with people in my experience. And then from there, what I want to get to is one KPI or one number. And if you can get it to one, that's great. Sometimes it has to be a little bit more, but how's this going and how are we influencing that? That's like the main business thing. So it's like front desk. It's going to be like, okay, what's our unanswered call rate? Oh, you got it below the 10% goal. That's awesome. How did you do it? Tell me about that. And then the next week they didn't hit. Okay, why didn't we hit it? Oh, okay, that makes sense. And then I want to offer support in finding a solution. I want them to find a solution, but if they can't do it, then I want to offer support through them finding a solution. What are some things that you do to make one-on-ones? Like for somebody, the person listening right now hates one-on-ones. They don't want to do it. And in their head, the first question is, what am I even going to talk about for 30 minutes with this person every single week or every other week? How would you help them structure those?
Well, you know what? I would say do have a structure and have an idea of what you're saying. I think a lot of us don't want to go into this because we're worried it's going to turn into a salary discussion. And I know that from working with my coaching clients, but the only time this turns into a salary discussion is when this is the only time you do it is a salary discussion. So you make sure if you're doing it more often, your team won't expect this as a salary discussion. So I go into mine and I'll just share, like I'll throw in for you, throw in the show notes, Gary. I have a guide on one-on-ones that I'd be willing to share if anyone wants that. But my big thing is just realizing, and I do the same thing as you, we're trying to build a relationship. It's very hard to coach people. It's very hard to work with people. There's zero relationship. We need to have a relationship with our team. And I'm saying it doesn't need to be deep, but you need to know, like, you need to know their kids' names. You need to know who their husbands or spouses are. It's hard to correct anybody when the only interactions we have with them is transactional via an employer-employee relationship. But my big questions are, how are you liking it here? Do you still like your job? And my big one that I like to press on, because people sometimes they'll say they don't give me an answer. What frustrates you when you're here? Oh, nothing. Everything's great. Well, what frustrates you? Like, if you do ever get frustrated here? No, not really. I mean, you have to. And I don't care how miniature it is. I can't think of anything. And you just keep going and asking. And eventually they'll be like, yeah, no, nothing, maybe just little things here. What little thing? And they'll give you some big thing that probably happens every single day that pisses them off.
The dental
Yeah.
assistant is sexually harassing me or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And the thing is that when you start doing this, so I just did my first one with that front desk person. I just mentioned that. I had to do a lot of probing for that one. For my team members that have been with me for years and they know that I'll talk to them this way, they will literally come in and they just dump. They're just like this, 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 this. And I'm not saying nobody wants to come and do a complaint fest, but it's all with the idea of let's work together. Let's not point fingers. Let's come up with solutions. It's about what are the solutions because everything's figure outable. We just got to figure it out. And my thing is like, when we create systems and processes, we can look at that system and process and say, where did the breakdown in the system happen? Sometimes it's a person not doing maybe they don't have the training, maybe they don't have the abilities, but maybe they don't have the motivation. But sometimes it's a process. So I don't care who's doing it. I don't want to point fingers. What are we going to come up with so this doesn't happen again? And I would say, like Gary, you said 30 minutes. Mine are usually typically I'd say they're less than 10 minutes long. They're fairly fast unless somebody has a lot to talk about and there's a lot going on. And I would say I spend a little bit more time if I'm going to do one with a front desk person because I typically don't have as deep of relationships with the front desk because I don't personally spend a lot of time at that area of the office. But it's still, I mean, they're quick. They don't have to be these big meetings. I mean, they're pretty spontaneous for the most part. It's you just got to try it and get comfortable with it. Same thing with like giving your team appreciation. Some people just are scared to say, "Man, great job," or "Thank you so much for doing that." And sometimes they say that, and when they'll say it one time to somebody, and they go, "What's wrong with you? What do you want? Like, what are you doing?" And you just got to push past that. Like, no, I just want to try to show more appreciation around here, and you're going to see a lot more of it. And after a while, you do it for a little bit, that becomes the new norm. I mean, we can change. Like people are never going to say, man, I like the old doc that never said thank you and just left without saying bye. They like the one that says thank you and appreciates and wants to have relationships and know what's going on in their employees' lives. So anybody can change. It's just a matter of doing it. And like anything we do, we get better at it the more we do it.
I love your point about the salary increases. For us, like we have set times when we do reviews for salary increases. So no one asks us for a raise anymore because they know this is the time we do it. This is the process. And they know what they're being graded off of. So once you get that in, but before when I didn't have the systems and we didn't have those things in place, yeah, it was like, oh, stink. I got to talk to this person. They're going to ask for more money. And it was because there was no rules to the game. But once people are just looking for rules to the game, right? And then once you supply that, then they're not going to ask those things and they're not going to wonder those things because they already know, oh, we do that at the end of the year or in the middle of the year. And these are the KPIs that I'm going to be judged off of to get a raise or not get a raise.
And without the rules is what's interesting is saying is that if you don't make the rules and what people are being judged against, they're going to judge their performance against your worst performing employee. They're going to say, well, I do way more than that person. So I deserve way more money than that person. It's like, so like, unless you're coming up with these KPIs and goals and sitting down and like having goals and vision for the practice, I mean, everyone's just flying around like it's chaos. And we're just, and everybody's got a low performing employee. We all have one. There's got to be the lowest performer. And we don't want to judge our good performers on the basis of our low performers. We want to judge our good performers on the basis of what our expectation is.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go take this in another direction. So dentists are typically perfectionists, right? And I think that's a large part of what attracts them to dentistry. You can dial in someone's smile without much influence from their body. Maybe they have heart issues or lung issues or other problems going on in their body, but you can get their smile really, really good. And dentists operate in these little windows, and they're perfectionists. They like to get things just right, and that can become a big problem when delegating to your team. And all entrepreneurs deal with this, but I think dentists even more so. So how do you have any rules or frameworks that you use when you're working with a team or you're working with somebody to help them delegate to their team to run the office? How do you get over this thing of like, they're just not going to do it right and they don't do it the way that I want them to do it? How do you, because they're not at first, like you even said it in the report, the financial report, she didn't get it right on the first shot, right? Like, how do you work through that with your clients?
Yeah, and this is something that I discovered kind of on my own, just magically, just it happened, is that I felt like that a lot too. Is I felt like there's no way I can give away for example, I sometimes felt like I was the cheerleader of the practice. I was the one doing all the appreciation. I was the one being like, let's go, guys. We're going to have a great day. I was the one bringing all the enthusiasm. And nobody else could possibly do that because I'm such a magical person and my personality just shines and it's just contagious. And all it took is me sitting down with my leads and being like, I would love for you to take more responsibility on. And I want you to be like I am. I want you to go around and appreciate people, recognize them for the things they're doing. And I want you to help people when they need help. Do you think you could do that? And I remember my main assistant goes, yeah, I can do that. I've been watching you do it for years. I already do that. And then, and then I realized that they do it a lot better than I do. But the thing is you have to accept that when you grow a practice, you're going to get a lot of things and a lot of responsibilities. And the bigger your team gets, the more things are just going to land in your lap because there's just more things can happen. And that's normal. But if you don't delegate these things to people, you're just going to get so overwhelmed with everything. You're going to have a pile of things to do, not enough time to do it. And everything you're going to do is going to be in a hurry. And when we do things in a hurry, it sucks. Nobody's in a good mood when they're in a hurry. So you've got to accept that it's good enough. You know, I mean, you can make training. I make Word documents when I train people on stuff sometimes. I'll make a screen share, screen recording with me talking over it. And this expense report, I did this by just sitting down next to her and be like, watch, I will show you. And you've got to accept that if it's done, 80% as well as you're going to do it, that's good enough. We've got to accept good enough. I mean, I remember for so many years, I felt like I had an A practice and damn, did I want that A plus, and all the energy to make it from A to A plus, or just from A minus to A plus, it's so much energy. And I said, you know what? A minus is pretty damn good. Let's stop focusing on the little things that went wrong. Look at all the reviews we're getting. Look at all the patients we have. We're doing great, but like we get this. I think it comes from dental school. Is we feel like every opportunity must not be missed. We must get every single opportunity. And there's a point where you just got to think of your mental health and be like, man, it's good enough. I am happy with good enough. And I'll tell you, my leadership team, the things going on at my practice, there are things going on at my practice right now. I have no idea what they are. And I like it that way. If I want to find out, I'll ask them what's going on, who's not getting along with who and whatnot. But they have the expectation that they're not to tell me about anything unless they need my support and help with it. And that has been a game changer for me, because for me as a leader, when people are unhappy at my practice, I take that personally. I shouldn't, but I do. And I know a lot of doctors do. I would rather have the ignorance of it. I don't know what's going on, but I know I have people in charge of it and they're taking care of it. That's what I love.
That's awesome. If this is a really, really good episode, and I would love to bring you on again and talk more about these things. Maybe we could pick a topic to go through. But if someone wants to reach out to you and learn about your podcast or what you do with the consulting, what's the best way to get connected with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my podcast is Dental Practice Heroes. We are focused on, getting owners out of the chair so that they can focus on their business and have more freedom. We want to grow scalable practices, so that everything that I do is to grow a scalable practice to give the owner more freedom. My website is dentalpracticeheroes.com. You can go on there. There's coaching options, and there's also a big training. I got tons of training on there, tons of like worksheets, modules. It's all intended to be consumed by the doctor as well as the team. And a big part of my training is that everything I teach is I am explaining on the two premises. One, this is going to be a great place for people that work here. Two, this is going to be a great place for our patients. So I wanted to get buy-in from the team, so everything's created in that manner. But we've got a community on there. We've got training. We've got something called the Hero Collective. We've got all sorts of things. But the podcast, Dental Practice Heroes, and check out my website, dentalpracticeheroes.com, and you can learn more about what we provide.
That's awesome, Dr. Paul. Great job. I love all these topics that you talked about are great. And good job on building the practice that you love working at and then helping other people do the same. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This was fun.